SARS-CoV-2 protection or inflammation, or the lack of the natural killer cell during the COVID-19 disease and the effect of it. So let's start this discussion. The primary goal to figure out is that are the natural killer cells necessary, and is it possible that natural killer cells somehow have reduced in their function and number in the COVID-19, which then causes the infection severity to increase? So we are going to look at a couple of models here. First of all, those who just want to know the answer, yes, natural killer cells in COVID-19 disease pathogenesis become severely reduced in number, and they become reduced in their function, and they're called functionally exhausted. Those exhausted natural killer cell are actually they were supposed to be the first responder of our system or our inflammation. Good morning, everyone. And they were supposed to take care of the virus by reducing its replication. And when the natural killer cells cannot do that function, then the first responder function of our immune system breaks down. That allows the virus to live in our body longer and replicate faster till our immune system becomes ready with the adaptive immune arm. And till that time, virus has done a lot of damage. So if the natural killer cells were present in the correct number, and if they were functioning correctly, then the the hypothesis is that the virus replication will not be that fast and the severity of the disease will be less. So we will actually prove this by a couple of studies, or we will show that there are a couple of studies that to talk about the children who seem to have milder symptoms or even being asymptomatic, and why they are that way. The answer is that their natural killer cells are more, and their natural killer cells stay more active as well. So this is the basic idea. Now we are going to go into the deeper discussion of how the natural killer cells work. Why would they become exhausted? Why are they better working in the children? Why they are not better working in the adults? And then what happens to when their function goes down. So this is the discussion. I've given you the summary of the discussion before. So if you wanted to just hear this much, you are welcome to leave. But if you wanted to understand the deeper mechanics, then you can stay with us. So very good. Welcome, guys. Chantal, good morning. Good morning, Sue. Good morning, Muhammad Tahir. Good morning, Aras. Good morning, Tal. Good morning, Ruslana. And good morning, everyone. So let's continue. So again, the discussion today is about the natural killer cell, their role in innate immunity, and their role in COVID-19. So let's start. Walaikum assalam. So here is our lecture. I have a few studies here as well. So let me share my screen. Good evening, Kelly. How are you? So first of all, there is an article here in the European Respiratory Journal. Will children reveal their secret? The coronavirus dilemma. And the discussion there that they have done is that children seem to have milder symptoms, or they even, as we saw yesterday in our talk, that 30% of the children are asymptomatic. So the question is, why are they asymptomatic? And the question is that why do they have milder symptoms? So that is something related to natural killer cells as well. So let's very quickly look at the study, and then I'm going to explain the mechanisms. They say that epidemiological evidence shows that SARS-CoV-2 infection in children is less frequent and severe than adults. Age-related ACE2 receptor expression, lymphocyte count, and trained immunity may be the keystone to reveal children's secret. So what they're saying is this. Let me explain it, and then we'll go back to the mechanism. What they're saying is that, number one, in children, ACE2 receptor, the same receptor with which the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the coronavirus, binds, they say that in the children, those receptors are upregulated. And we have done this discussion many times in our previous talks, that ACE2 receptors, as much as that they are binders for coronavirus, they are also very important for vasodilatation. And many people have left comment that, hey, guy, do you not know that ACE is vasoconstriction? We are talking about ACE2 receptors, And we are talking about angiotensin 1 to 7. We are not talking about angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is a vasoconstrictor. Angiotensin 1 to 7, which is converted by ACE2 receptors, is a vasodilator. The second function of ACE2 receptor, which is very important, is that ACE2 receptors are anti-inflammatory. So in children, naturally, because they are young and their bodies are actually structured better, they're growing, their number of ACE2 receptors are more in them. And because of that, there is a anti-inflammatory response in them, which is better than us. And that is one reason that their bodies respond better. Second reason in them is that they have a larger number of lymphocytes, including natural killer cells. And their natural killer cells, as compared to adults in COVID-19, their natural killer cells live longer, probably because they are greater in number. So even when the COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 affects the natural killer cells and downregulates them, in children, the number of natural killer cells is so large that even after the downregulation, they have enough natural killer cells to continue to fight with the virus. And that is why they have milder symptoms or maybe even asymptomatic. So this also tells us that if we have better NK cells or more NK cells or NK cells that do not get exhausted, then we can actually fight COVID-19 better as well. So that is a basic takeaway from this study. Now let's continue our discussion. The second study, or the second article that I want to show you here is this article that says cellular immune response to severe acute respiratory syndrome. This is SARS-CoV, not SARS-CoV-2. This is the 2012 infection. And what they're saying is that the NK cell and cytotoxicity lymphocytes were very important in combating the infection. So again, because we are focusing today on the NK cells or natural killer cells, this is the study that depicts that natural killer cells were very important to make sure that the infection with SARS-CoV was properly combated or fought. So I want to go here. So these data indicate that in the absence of, look, this is a very important statement here. These data indicate that in the absence of both T cells and antibiotics, that means the adaptive part of the immune system, innate defense mechanisms are able to control SARS-CoV infection. So again, we're talking about SARS-CoV, not SARS-CoV-2, but that virus is about 70 to 80% same to this virus, and probably their behaviors are the same as well. So in the previous infection, the innate arm alone was sufficient to take care of the infection. And then they've talked here, the activation of the innate defense system at the early phase of the infection appears to play an important role in the control. So let's look at that for a second. So here is our lecture. I'm going to bring it back and let's go and see what these guys are saying. Look, the first thing is, we know that when the virus, and I have been making this diagram for a long time now, when the virus appears in our body, there are macrophages that are going to eat that virus. So this is the macrophage. It is going to eat that virus. Then it is going to present parts of that virus to our naive lymphocytes. And then from there, we know that either B cells. So I have been drawing it so many times that just for the time's sake, I'm going fast. B cells and T cells. So this is T helper 2 pathway, this is T helper 1 pathway, and this pathway becomes active in our body for the SARS-CoV-2 infection. And so what they're saying is, the study that I just showed you, they are showing the role of NK cells. So let me explain how NK cells work. They are actually here. So look, this is how NK cells work. Here is a natural killer cell. This is a natural killer cell. This is a healthy cell. What happens is, natural killer cell, let me make it here for a second. Here is a natural killer cell. The function of an NK cell is to come close to every healthy cell or every infected cell. So let's say this is an infected cell. This has lots of coronaviruses in it. So it comes close to healthy cells and the infected cells. It connects with them, and I'll show you the binding here, but just in general, it connects with them and checks them if they are making their MHC1 complex protein correctly. All nucleated cells, all nucleated healthy cells make MHC1, and they use that to present antigens on their surface. Right? So now let's say that this is a healthy cell, and here is an NK cell. NK cell comes and connects with the healthy cell, and if the MHC protein is present to bind, then the NK cell gives this healthy cell a certificate and says, yeah, you are okay, you're fine, you're good. On the other hand, a cancer cell or a virus infected cell, remember the viruses enter the cell and they hijack the machinery of the cell. Because of that, the cell cannot make its own proteins, including its own MHC. It cannot make them. So now imagine when a natural killer cell, it's like an inspector of the cells. When it comes near an infected cell, it does not find the MHC1 molecule to be present. Instead, it always has the other receptors as well that connect for activation. So this particular receptor of the NK cell, which is looking for MHC1, does not find MHC1, and that causes the NK cell to become active. In a nutshell, that is what happens. This is a similar behavior with the cancer cell as well. Cancer cells on their surface, not only they do not have the correct MHCs, but they also exhibit something called mica, and natural killer cell can detect mica and then know that this cell is bad. So once an NK cell has figured out that another cell is not healthy because there is a virus in it or there is cancer in it, then what an NK cell does is the following. Here is the NK cell, natural killer cell. Here is an infected cell. NK cell would throw a protein at it, which is called perforin protein. Perforin goes and makes holes in the target cells, and then NK cell throws hand grenades in the cell. These are called granzymes. Granzymes, when they go into the cell, they tell that cell to kill itself, or they cause apoptosis. So this is the process. Thank you, Betty. Yeah, so this is the process by which a natural killer cell kills a virus or cancerous cell, a virus infected cell or a cancerous cell. And now, important thing here to realize, I'm going to stop the sharing for a second. The important thing to realize is this: as soon as the virus comes and goes into our cells, the first responders are macrophages, neutrophils, and NK cells. They can start responding within 24 to 48 hours. On the other hand, the immunoglobulin making cells, the B cells, are going to take 7 to 10 days to become ready. So what do you think? Which cells need to be active right away? NK cells, macrophages, and neutrophils. And you would see in the studies that in this infection with the COVID-19, with SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 infection, NK cell become downregulated. So this function of NK cell, which is necessary to start killing those cells where the virus is sitting and replicating, this function goes down. That means the virus can now sit comfortably in the cells without the fear of NK cell and coming and killing those cells, and it just replicates. The virus replicates, and that is how the infection becomes severe and becomes a disease. So now the question is, what causes the NK cell to behave like this? So here is an NK cell. I'm going to call it cell A. This is a healthy cell. As I said, the healthy cells exhibit a protein on them, which is called MHC1, or major histocompatibility complex 1. NK cell have a receptor that connects with that protein. And if this happens, if this connection happens, that means everything is fine. And if everything is fine, then NK cell goes away and says nothing to this cell. This is why we say that the receptor that binds to MHC1, the NK cell receptor that binds to MHC1 is an inhibitory receptor. And there are multiple types of such inhibitory receptors. So if you see here, there are KIR type, NKG2A type, and many more. Then, here is another cell. This cell is sick. This cell is sick. It is not exhibiting MHC1. NK cell comes in, tries to connect with the MHC1. It does not find the MHC1, but the other ligands are connecting. FAS, L, and FAS are connecting. So what NK would do is the following. So pay attention to this guy. It would release interferon gamma, which would activate the dendritic cells in the plasma. It would release interferon alpha. It would release, or it would upregulate more NK cells. This is the marker of the NK cell, CD107A. So it would help other NK cells become more in number. It would also release interleukin-2. It would also release granzymes and perforins that would help kill this cell. So what happened was, all of a sudden, NK cell has taken over, and he is saying that, all right, I'm going to start killing the cells that are virally infected. Now imagine if I get the infection today and my NK cells are not working, then those first responders whose job is to kill the cells for enough number of time, enough amount of time, that are B cells with immunoglobulin in 7 to 10 days become active, those cells, NK cells, are not functioning correctly. So this is the basic problem. Let's now very quickly look at the NK cell. NK cells are the early producers of interferon gamma. Number one, this is very important for the discussion today. Interferon gamma enhances the activity of other immune cells. So imagine if correct. And secondly, they facilitate the adaptive immunity. If you see here, that discussion we did, this is the adaptive immunity arm. This is the arm that becomes active in 7 to 10 days and takes care of the COVID-19 or other kind of infections. NK cells help amplify the function of the adaptive immunity. They also help amplify the function of the innate immunity. Innate immunity is really, really important for the initial few days of the fighting with the virus, while the adaptive immunity will become ready in 7 to 10 days. And we would see that NK cells would be lower in their function. So back here, NK cells secrete perforins and granzymes. We just talked about it. They connect with other cells with the FAS ligands. They do not need prior exposure because their innate system, they become active as soon as some virus comes in. They do not need someone to come and tell them to become active, just like T or B cells. So they are really important that as soon as the virus comes, they are the one who should be responding. And if they're not there, then we are in trouble. IgG can enhance the activity. So when the adaptive side releases IgG, that IgG can enhance the NK cells. That's just a property to keep in mind. Both systems, innate and the adaptive systems, amplify each other. They also release IL-12 and gamma interferon, IL-12 and gamma interferons are potent activators of the NK cells. So keep this in mind. NK cells make 5 to 10% of our peripheral lymphocytes. Number one, their deficiency causes, so before coronavirus, we knew that their deficiency causes life-threatening infections with cytomegalovirus and varicella zoster. This is Mobeen, I would actually add now SARS-CoV-2, the same thing as well, that NK cell deficiency in SARS-CoV-2 causes life-threatening infections. Okay, so that is done. Now, over here, look at this. This is how they function. They detect the density of MHC1 on healthy cells. They're kind of pervert cells, NK cells. They touch every other cell. And they're looking for mica on the cell, or they're looking for the density of MHC1. If mica is present, then the cell is cancerous cell, and NK cell is going to kill that cell right away. If MHC1 density is less on a cell, imagine if the cell doesn't have hair or something, then they're going to kill that cell as well, because that means it's a sick cell. It may have a pathogen in it which is hijacked its machinery. So they detect mica. They also release these things that are of interest with us. So come back here. Now let's look at this. This is the important part, COVID-19 and NK cell. Look, in the children, I showed you that study here, this study. In the children, NK cell number is generally more because in the children, number of lymphocytes in the early part of their age is just generally more than adults. Number two, they have found that NK cell exertion is less in children. And the theory is that probably there are so many NK cells that if a portion of them is exhausted, others are still functioning. And then NK cells are more active in children as compared to adults. And the reason for that, they postulated, was because children get more respiratory infections compared to adults. That means their NK cells and their respiratory defending cells are already more active, including the NK and macrophages. Secondly, they feel that when children get more infections, there is a cross-reaction of the immune system. That means if you get infected with, let's say, coronavirus of human species, but then that would train your immune system to try to attack the coronavirus of the bat species as well, which in adults we are seeing is failing. But maybe in children, other infections are keeping their immune system upticked, immune system active and running. And that is why children actually can take care of the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 better and with milder symptoms. In the adults, they have seen, and I have the studies here, that, so here is a study. Here, this is the study. It is on COVID-19 patients. So it is SARS-CoV-2 study. And in this, that in the patients of SARS-CoV-2, the number of NK cells and the function of NK cell is reduced. So that's a very interesting, fascinating thing. How does that happen is not known. We do not know yet that how come this virus, SARS-CoV-2, causes the NK cell to become exhausted and reduced in number. But we know from studies that this is observed that they are reduced in number. So in adults, NK cell number is less, which is really, really sad. Then NK cells are exhausted. And I'll talk about it, that what does exhausted mean, which is even more sad, that the ones that are there are exhausted. They're not functioning correctly. And then number of active NK cells are less as well. So all sad news for adults compared to children. Again, that doesn't mean that every adult is at risk. You know that about 94-95% of the people will recover. Our immune system will beat them up. But that initial responder mechanism is not working correctly. That is why people suffer for a longer time, because we wait for a B cell to produce immunoglobulins, which would take time. Then those immunoglobulins fight with the virus, which would also take time. Then there can be cytokine storm that would also take time to be taken care of. So misery for an adult can become over weeks and months, while children can very happily come out of it very, very easily. So this is what is happening with the adult versus children. Now let's see what is an exhausted NK cell. So in the essence of time, I had done these things before. So an exhausted NK cell, here is a study. This is a study which has talked about the exhausted NK cell. And again, I'll put those links out there. It says in many tumors or chronic infections. See, they said chronic infection. SARS-CoV-2 is not a chronic infection. Even then, it is behaving in this way. It's a totally new virus with a new way of attacking us. Multiple mechanisms might contribute to the exhaustion of NK cells, such as, so listen to this one. What causes an NK cell to be exhausted? Dysregulated NK cell receptor signaling, as well as suppressive effects by regulatory cells. We know that in the immune system, there are cells that are regulatory cells here. These cells, for example, T helper 17 cells, these cells' function is to dampen the immune system, so immune system does not become a runaway train and start killing everything. That is what happens in the case of SARS-CoV-2. But the regulatory system is low. But what is happening is that regulatory cells kind of crush the NK cells early on. What trick did the virus play to do this? We do not know yet. But we know that virus has come in, it has caused a regulatory system to go and suppress the NK cells, so they are already less. Secondly, the NK cells receptor, so see, this is a receptor of a natural killer cell. When this becomes active, the natural killer cell has to now produce all the interleukins and perforins and granzymes, but the interior of the cell, the mechanism inside the cell that is supposed to activate these production of cytokines, that is broken down. How is that broken down? Don't know yet. But it is broken down. The end result is that this is called an exhausted NK cell. A cell whose internal mechanism is not working correctly, like here, and a cell which is suppressed by the regulatory system. Result is what? Result is interferon production by NK cell is reduced. This is a very important thing. Interferon gamma is very important to activate macrophages and to activate the dendritic cells. These cells are not only killers, macrophage, for example, not only killer of the, the pathogens, but these cells are also important for activating the adaptive system. So the whole system is now suppressed. So that is one. Interferon gamma is less. Secondly, cytolytic activity of the NK cell. Remember, NK cell not only recruits the other cells, it actually causes the cytolytic activity here, or which I mentioned here. The NK cell's cytolytic activity is reduced. So their own powers to kill cells have become reduced. So our first responders, just like we healthcare professionals are first responders at this time in the hospitals for COVID-19, and imagine if we become sick and we are not able to take care of the patients because we ourselves are sick, then the hospital system or the healthcare system breaks down. NK cell is that way. It is the first responder. Yes, the Luffy is running around. If I get a chance, I'll pick him up and bring him here to have him meet us. So that is the exhausted cell. Now, when an NK cell is exhausted, what happens? Dr. Ian, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I love doing that video, and hopefully we'll do more videos there. So thank you. Okay, so when we talk about an exhausted cell, what is the outcome of that? Yes, my cat is calling, I know. Look, here is an exhausted NK cell. When it is exhausted, this is an important thing that happens on its surface. The NKG2D receptor cluster or protein cluster becomes increased on its surface. And it releases them out as well. And here is a funny thing. When the NKG2D cluster increases, this cluster will make other T cells, cytotoxic T cell, that is CD8 plus cells, and other NK cells. These things make them inactive as well. So not only this cell has become inactive, it has expressed proteins that are going to make other cells that are functioning inactive as well. So it is causing quite a lot of damage. Then what happens is, when the NK cell is exhausted, new NK cells are reduced in number because the factors that are coming from this NK cell are also helping to create more cells or proliferate more cells. Then interferon gamma reduction happens, then interferon alpha, and then IL-2. When all of these are reduced, innate system goes down. Can you imagine? The virus comes in, attacks the NK cell. In what way? I do not know. I haven't seen those studies yet. But rips down, tears down the innate system, and now our body is sitting like a sitting duck for 7-10 days till our adaptive system becomes active. And in that time, in that window of time, the virus just rips through our body and starts causing damage. So there is a study, this study that I had shown here. Functional exhaustion of antiviral lymphocytes in COVID-19 patients. In this study, they showed that what happens is that during the early part of the infection, NK cell number goes down, all of these things go down, the cytokines, macrophage function goes down, and when the person recovers, this is very interesting. When the person recovers, the number of cells and the expression of active markers and cytokines is restored in convalescing patients. So imagine if the NK cells were already present, or if we had a way to bring them into our body from outside, we could have defeated the virus right at the natural innate arm of the system. I showed you a study that says that just the innate arm is sufficient to take care of the virus if it is functioning correctly. So these are the studies. This is the discussion. Here is another article where, as I had said to you here, that NKG2D receptors are increased. So they are saying that NKG2A receptors and CD94 complex is essential to bind with the non-classical MHC1, and this causes inhibitory signals which suppresses NK and CD8 cells. So somehow our natural killer cell start expressing those inhibitory system. So not only a cell gives up, it makes others sad as well and makes them give up as well. Can you imagine this? It's like a sad person. If I am sad today, I'm going to be sad by myself and not do a lot of things. And then everybody who comes in my sphere is also going to become sad, and I'll take their energy away as well. That is what this cell does. So this is another interesting article to read. Here is a study for NK cell exhaustion. I had showed that before. This is the NK cell marker CD107A. And here is the interferon gamma, which starts reducing when the NK cells are not functioning correctly. And interferon gamma is produced predominantly by NK and NKT cells. Can you imagine? Of course, interferon gamma is also produced by helper cells, which are the NKT cells, as part of the innate immune. Innate immune, NK and NKT cells, and the adaptive immune system, CD4 T helper and CD8 cytotoxic, which is what? So let's go and see that. If I go back here for a second, this part was the adaptive immune cytotoxic part. That was T helper 2 cell and then cytotoxic T cell. These guys, T helper 2 also releases interferon gamma, which in turn activates the macrophages and dendritic cells and other. So end result, we are done with the talk for today. End result is that when we have a lack of natural killer cells, and how does that lack appear? We do not know. How does that lack appear? What does SARS-CoV-2 that does? That lymphocytes reduce in number? At least I'm not clear from those studies yet. Previous virus studies are present, but SARS-CoV-2 is not present. But this is known that these natural killer cells are reduced in number, natural killer cells are reduced in function, and then those exhausted cells are making other cells inhibited as well. So the innate arm of the immune system is killed or reduced in its function. So that is what happens. NK cells are depressed in the patients who get COVID-19. I think there may be mechanisms to make them activated again, signaling pathways, or there may be ways to introduce new NK cells from outside to help fight the patient in the beginning. This is a beginning phase infection. This is not a late phase infection thing. So hope this is clear. Any questions before we break? And tomorrow we'll talk about the children and why they are asymptomatic. I'll give you a little clue here as well. Why they are asymptomatic and will they shed or not shed, and why they can protect themselves better. So the storm, very good question. So Tal is asking at what point the storm occurs. Storm needs the interleukins and immunoglobulins and innate arm to be active as well. So storm is usually 4 or 5 days later when the innate arm starts going crazy, and after that when the cytokines become too much and we start having vasodilatation from the other cells, that is when the storm starts. So 5-6 days later, but normally 7 to 10 days later when the pneumonia starts developing. would you please talk about immunoglobulins production? Is there any supplement that may help with that? So, Kenley, I have done a discussion in the past about the vitamin C and vitamin D and quercetin. I haven't specifically talked about how they help with immunoglobulin production. I'll talk about it later, but that's a good topic to discuss. What do we do to survive a cytokine storm? We have to be in the hospital. So cytokine storm cannot be survived at home. So we have to be in the hospital. They're going to give us oxygen. They're going to put us on the ventilator if needed. They're going to give us antivirals, maybe IL-6 inhibitors. And so there is a cocktail of things that they would do. So Michael is saying, would a decrease in immunonutrition be responsible for NK reduction? So this is one part which I do not know. That how does SARS-CoV-2, is it possible that a person was already deficient in NK cell and that made SARS-CoV-2 more lethal for them? Or is it that the SARS-CoV-2 comes into the body and causes the NK cells to go down? I am not sure, but studies say that in the presence of SARS-CoV-2, the NK cell function and their number is exhausted or less. Mohammed Tahir says, is non-specific response? Yes, so innate is a non-specific response. They are the first responders. You are most welcome, Kelly. Thank you very much for joining. If we are good, then I am going to hang up. There are ways to boost your NK cell count to build immunity against all viruses and bacteria. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Sleep smart and smash stress. Very good. All right. So far from clear, besides hot and cold showers, what else increases their production? Do any of NK cells are part of our innate immune system. So whenever there is some infection or stress in our body, that is when they start helping, especially with the viral or cancer things. But NK cells are usually present in a plenty of the quantity in all of us. You mentioned in your previous video when cells are affected by warmer temperature, the ventilation with warm air video. Yeah, so I had mentioned that. I'd done that video. Was there a question? Kathleen says, are you able to talk about how people with epilepsy will be? We can do that. Yesterday I did diabetes plus SARS-CoV-2. I'm going to talk about type 1 diabetes, then I'm going to talk about asthma, then I'm going to talk about cardiovascular system and SARS-CoV-2, and we'll see if we can also talk about epilepsy. Cool. So guys, thank you very much. Is migrating joint pain commonly seen in COVID-19? I have not heard of that. I know that migratory joint pain can be associated with rheumatic fever type things or other autoimmune diseases. I haven't heard about this. Cat. Okay, so where is the cat? Luffy. So maybe tomorrow I'll have him ready. He's just running around somewhere over here. So guys, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining. And I would see you tomorrow. We'll continue our discussion. Bye-bye.